Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast. But yeah, man, so we might as well just, you ready to jump into this?
Yeah, of course.
Well, there we go. How's it going, Corey? Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast. How's your day going?
Awesome, man. So happy to be here. Thank you, man.
No problem at all. I've been looking forward to this one. We first connected, what was that? I feel like back in like December, maybe?
Yeah, probably December. I don't know. I've been following you for a while, so I've probably known you before you knew me. But yeah.
Well, it was good to. I feel like we connected on that Magic Eden Launchpad and Grill, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that. But to start off, for people who don't know who you are, can you give a brief intro to yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Corey. I'm the CEO of Honeyland. I'm one of the co-founders. So there you go.
There we go. And then what were you doing before getting into NFTs?
Man, so I'm 40, so I'm not like one of the young people running around the space right now. So I've for 2 decades been building businesses. I've been an entrepreneur all my life in Web 2. It's funny. I always like to joke. The last time I collected a paycheck from somebody else that wasn't myself, it was from Circuit City. So that'll give you an idea of like how long I've been just running businesses. And so I started by launching like a marketing agency, did a ton of marketing, built a marketing business, built a SaaS business, ended up building a couple SaaS businesses, and then built a e-commerce business. I got lucky with kind of a product idea, was trying to have some fun, and ended up building like a pretty successful e-commerce business as well. And so I had a bunch of kind of like businesses that I've been running. I ended up selling in 2019, like kind of a bundle of a lot of my businesses to someone, and then got into business coaching and kind of loved the entrepreneurial drive, but wasn't ready to like operate something again. And so I started working with a bunch of leadership teams of growing businesses doing like between 10 and 50 million in revenues, helping them to continue to grow and accelerate and organize all the energy of a leadership team with accountability and communication and focus and all that type of stuff. And so it was a lot of fun. I got to see a ton of different businesses, and then the opportunity to kind of move into a Web3 project presented itself, and I was ready to get back into operating. So
There we go. I always love when people have actually been successful in Web 2 and then come into Web 3, because I'm always curious, like, if you've already been super successful in life, like, why did you feel the need to start an NFT project? Like, what got you into NFTs in general? And so I know we were just talking before we started the podcast and kind of how you got into crypto, but can you give everybody a little bit of background of how did you get into crypto, and then how did you get into NFTs from there?
Yeah, sure. So I would still consider myself like a newbie. I've dabbled. I'm always somebody who loves to learn. So when new tech or new trends start to surface, like in the tech world, I'm always one to try and jump in and kind of at least express some curiosity there. So back in 2016, when Coinbase kind of first hit and you're able to start trading some crypto, I got in there, put, a couple grand in there and rode that all the way up to like 100 grand trading ETH and Bitcoin and Litecoin. And I think those are the only 3 coins you could trade at the time. And then equally as fast, ran it all down to almost nothing. And so I experienced kind of the highs and the lows and did a lot of shitcoin trading and, just a bunch of different stuff. But I considered that all like really tuition. And I think of this as a lot of things in life. Like I've had a lot of successful businesses, but I've had a lot that didn't work out as well. But every single time I go in there and I think of them as ways that I can like learn and become better for the next thing that I'm going to build or the next opportunity that I have. And so I think that experience to like crypto kind of prepared me so that when NFTs came, I kind of already had these wallets set up. Like I kind of already knew what like crypto was. I had, and so it was a lot easier to kind of like on-ramp. And So I got back into, Web3 in 2020 with, minting, or actually I guess it was 2021. Man, the years kind of lose.
The years all blend together. Yeah.
But I remember it was Degenerate Apes was the very first NFT that, and I didn't even mint. I actually purchased on secondary, but I remember going to Solanart. That was really the only exchange at the time, or the one that I knew. And I remember buying 3 Degenerate Apes. My daughters were in the room, and I was like, hey, I'm going to buy you one. I'm going to buy me one. I bought one for each of my daughters. And really, it was just an excuse for me to be able to buy more of these cartoon JPEGs, right? And so, I bought those, and then it kind of, I wanted to feel like minting, like this idea of like actually having the opportunity to get something rare. And so I remember I minted the Bold Badgers. I don't know if you remember that collection, actually ended up then buying some on secondary. And I remember I spent 100 SOL on a Bold Badger. And, looking back at that is like crazy to even think about that. And so that was kind of like my intro into NFTs. And I just like became curious about the space. I eventually moved over, minted some ETH NFTs, kind of bounced back and forth. But, I was just kind of curious about the space. And then it was funny. So how this opportunity actually came is one of my co-founders, Justin, I had known from Entrepreneurs Organization. So when I was running my Web2 business, he had a really successful Web2 business as well, and user acquisition, and ended up going on to sell that for many, many tens of millions of dollars, and was really successful in that space. But we always stayed connected. He was somebody that I really admired as just like a founder and a builder. And so like we always stayed connected. And I wasn't very active on Instagram, but I remember that I saw he posted a picture. He's a big art like fanatic and loves like kind of wild and like indie style art. And he posted a picture of a Harry Pack like art. Who's an artist who I'd actually found him on OpenSea, loved his art as well. I went up and picked one of his NFTs, and I was like, so I hit him up. I was like, hey, did you like get a Harry Pack? He's like, no, I thought the art was really cool. And so I think that seeded in his head that like I was into NFTs and into Web3, and like and knew that I was a business operator and builder, and knew that I was into coaching, but like had time to kind of move into something else. And so kind of not to get like ahead of the story, but the idea is that like he had another one of our co-founders who had this vision to build like a Web3 game based on the success of Axie and all that type of stuff, and reached out to him and was like, hey, listen, I have basically like a gaming studio that is like ready to go and ready to build. I've got a vision. I know that like user acquisition. Let's assemble a team here. And so he had reached out to me and said, hey, listen, we've got this opportunity. Let's hop on a call on Monday. Let's kind of walk through this vision. Let's see what it is. By the way, have you ever heard of Axie Infinity? I was like, no, I haven't. He's like, go do some research over the weekend, because this is what Web3 gaming is. And we'll talk about everything on Monday. And so that was kind of the inception of like where the idea came from. And, once we started talking, on that Monday, we saw just like this huge opportunity, and I just became obsessed from that point, and that was kind of the next thing. So
there we go. And so was that at the end of 2021, or when did those like conversations first start occurring?
Yeah. So just before Thanksgiving of 2021. And it's funny, I mentioned how I had like a successful e-commerce business, and I had actually, back in 2016, my wife went out of town for like a weekend, and I was like, cool, this is like, what better time to go build a business than this. And I didn't have kids at the time. And so I just stayed up all weekend long building like an e-commerce store for the very first time. I set up a Shopify store. I did all the art. I did all this stuff. And then I opened it up on Monday and was doing it as like like tuition, like an experiment. My goal wasn't to like build an e-commerce business. It was to learn about e-commerce, because I felt like that was a trend that would have value in the future. And so I set that up, and I accidentally, I've been shying away from the product. So I sold Donald Trump bobbleheads, and I found these things in China on Alibaba. I was like, hey, let's do this. I ordered 1,000 of them. I spit up a website. I started launching some Facebook ads, and all of a sudden I started actually selling these things. And I was like, what the heck? No political affiliation. I just thought it'd be a fun idea to sell, right? And he was in his, running for president. And so it was, and I started selling those things. And it was funny because my wife went out of town. Well, this Monday meeting, my wife was actually leaving town with my 2 daughters to go see her parents for the week. And so that Monday meeting happened, and I had basically 5 days to myself, and I didn't do anything. I mean, I slept probably 4 hours a day, just like getting into this. Like I caught the bug. And by the time she came back, I was like, so I did a thing again. I think I'm launching a business, right? And it was funny because I said, listen, this is probably going to require a lot of my time for the next like 3 months, and a little bit of my time like beyond that. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Fast forward, we're like 16 months later, where it dominates like, 60 hours a week. It's my full-time gig. It's my passion. It's everything that I can like think about right now. And outside of my family. I've kicked hobbies to the curb. I've kicked friends to the curb, not in a bad way, but in a way that like, this is just the biggest opportunity and the thing that excites me the most right now, that I've had in like a long, long time. And so it's like pretty much family and Honeyland, but it's like, it's intoxicating, man. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think the space definitely is. Like, when I first got into minting, we had a group chat, and we would just literally be like, yo, what are we minting today? Like, what's coming out? And we just got rugged a trillion times over. But I believe in the same philosophy that you do, that's like the tuition of getting into the space is like, you have to have screw-ups. You got to have like those huge L's. I love when I go into a Twitter space and people are just talking about like, what was your biggest L in crypto and NFTs and whatever. And people just be like, oh my God, I put $50,000 into this and it's worth zero now. And you learn that way, right? Like, if you're not a little bit degenerate, it's hard to get acclimated to like where we're at today. And, the space is very different from where we were at, in 2021 to now. But there's just like so much that you learn by just kind of being a degenerate, minting a bunch of shit, selling a bunch of shit, trying to think about like what project has the ability to 10x and like, and then also the amount of time you think you're going to put in versus like how much time you end up putting in. I thought NFTs would be something that like I do from time to time on the side. I didn't really see like the upside of it right away, right? And next thing you know, if you told me when I first bought my first NFT, hey, you're going to eventually have this podcast that people are going to come out to, want to be on your couch and have a conversation about NFT projects, I would have been like, no shot, right? And so you see kind of how this whole space goes. So okay, so when you guys first started talking about like Web3 gaming and everything like that, for people who aren't familiar with Axie Infinity, how is that like from where it was at in 2021 to where it's at now? Has it been a roaring success? Has it been kind of mediocre? Has it been a failure? Like, and then overall, like NFT gaming, what are your overall thoughts on the market?
Yeah, so it's funny because the very thing that like got us into this space, which was Axie, is the very thing that we're trying not to become at this point. And, but we've learned a ton, right, about like what they did right and what they did wrong. I think it proved that like there's this opportunity for Web3 gaming built around like, the idea of ownership of assets and a peer-to-peer economy where you can earn and own assets and trade them, where you can build around a token economy. And so I think it validated that as like a concept, but they just had some broken parts of the actual like mechanics of the game and the tokenomics that weren't built for sustainability. They were built for like a pump. And maybe they were a victim of their own success. I mean, to go from like 50,000, Axie wasn't created in 2021. It had been around since like 2017, right? And they just had, maybe like tens of thousands of daily active users, and all of a sudden they have 2 million daily active users. It's really difficult to have that type of growth in any business, Web 2 or Web 3. And I think they, to some extent, didn't have enough time to kind of react and adjust the way that they needed. But what I would say is, to answer your question, where it's gone and where it's become, I think very similar to NFT projects, like where NFT, like you could kind of, the rage was more about like putting a project out than like building a business or figuring out like what was going to make a project last forever. It's why we've had so many failed NFT projects, is because I think a lot of people were like, let's launch something and then figure it out. I always say the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, because I spent 2 decades in Web 2, is in Web 2, you work really, really hard to like build a product. And then if you build a great product, it creates hype, right? And in Web 3, you work really, really hard to build hype. And if you build hype, then you have to figure out what the hell you're going to actually build, right? And so I think it's backwards in that sense that like we're so used to like just figuring out how to launch great products, like how to ship great products. And from that is where we've always been able to build businesses and profits and all that stuff. And so I think it's been a little bit of an adjustment to like kind of learn Web3. And we've had to become a little bit of like, hey, well, we have to publish events that like spin up a little bit of hype or create activity. We've had intentionally like a 2-month drought because we have the alpha of our game right now. We minted our last collection back in December, and then the game is going to go live in like end of March, right? And so, but as we get to these final like phases, there's just a lot of like actual building and tidying up. It's not a lot of fun stuff. It's not mints and projects and raffles, and it's not all that. It's like actually getting to the. And so I kind of told the community like expect, because there's not going to be a lot of like events taking place between now and the game launch, expect the floor price to drop. Like. And it's just so funny how like that's like how this space works, right? I also said expect the floor price to probably have some sort of a resurrection and to become a lot healthier once the game launches and we're able to start onboarding a lot more players into the ecosystem and stuff. And so, hopefully that's kind of where we experience it. But I would say that Web3 gaming has gone through a similar kind of discovery phase of like, what does the what's the utility of a Web3 game versus a Web2 game, right? And like, how can we actually make that, how can we improve on Web2 gaming? Because Web2 gaming is really damn good. Like, there's not a lot that needs to be done for all these super addictive mobile games to continue to work, or console games or PC games to continue to work. They've been doing it for decades, wildly successfully. And so like the goal is, how do we improve on that through Web3, not just how do we back Web3 into some sort of a game. And I think that's what a lot of projects have done over the last year and a half, is really try and back Web3 into like a gaming model, as opposed to figure out how we actually improve on Web2 to make it something that players can get more benefit from than they could in Web2.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think Web3 gaming has always been something where I'm like I remember when I first got into NFTs, it felt like the first like 20 projects I saw would be like, and we're coming out with a game. And I remember the first one, I'm not going to mention names, but there was the first one I remember.
Soul Chicks.
No. No mentioning names. I don't know that project, but it was a different one. And I remember I sent it to my buddies in our group chat, and I was like, are we just not going to mention that this game looks terrible? Like, are we just going to be like, oh, that's sick? I was like, this looks like it was made in 1995. And I was like, no offense to them. I'm sure they put a lot of work into it, but like, what the fuck? And I think that the idea of like, you know, NFT projects and the meta behind like what works and what doesn't work, like what initially hyped projects a year ago is very different from what hypes projects now, right? And the like kind of the like what we expect from founders in terms of like communication and everything like that, that's very much shifted from a year ago to where we're at now, right? And so Web3 gaming, like when we first have the first successful, like truly crazy successful, consistently successful Web3 game, that is going to change the way others operate, because there's going to be something that you learn from that and something that you pivot towards based off the success of that game, right? And so a lot of it is like we're testing the waters of these are completely new concepts, and we're trying to figure out like what does a successful game look like, and what's going to be something that's going to cause people in Web2 to want to get into this, and what's going to cause people to talk about it when they're not in the room, right? And so when you guys were originally putting together the idea for Honeyland, can you give me like a brief summary of like, here's our 30-second elevator pitch of like what we wanted to create with Honeyland, and then we'll kind of get into the timeline of things, of the development process to mint and everything like that.
Yeah, it's funny because you know, we a little bit did back in like Web3 into a game initially, right? And then I think we kind of hit the reset button and we're like, okay, remember I told my wife this was going to be like a 3-month project. I had no idea, right, that this would be like my life for the next 3 to 5 to who knows how long years, right? And so I think that we kind of hit the pause or the reset button and said like, okay, let's actually look at like the opportunity here, and let's figure out how we can fix the things that have broken in the past. We can look at a game like Steppen that like took Solana over, you know, last year. And same thing, ran into just kind of this problem where they've gone from 180,000 daily active users to 5,000. Is it because it's not fun? I don't think that's the reason. I mean, the game didn't change. It didn't get any more or less fun, but they just had, it was fundamentally, there was some mechanics that could not work for sustainability. And so I think that we've really tried to focus on like sustainability at this point. So why we got into this game and like what the original vision was, and then I think where we've gone is that like, we truly want to build the blueprint for what Web3 gaming can look like in the future. And I think that there's a couple like necessary key components that have become foundational to our project that are, you know, that I think if we get this right, and I don't expect for us to get everything right. It's the beauty of Web3 is that there's a lot of kind of pivots. They're very public, but they're very, I think as long as you build trust with the community and you communicate well why you're doing it and what the thought behind it is, that, and you've earned that trust from kind of past performance, that, you know, you can make those and you can have a lot of support in doing it. And so I think, you know, we've got a couple like key principles that we're really trying to build that I think will become the blueprint for Web3 gaming.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. So, okay, so then my question for you would be, so like something like Steppen, when I first saw Steppen, my thought with it was that it was way too complicated. I was like, you know, my buddy was trying to explain it to me, and he's like, okay, so you got these shoes, right? And you got like this aspect of it, and then you got this aspect of it, then you got this aspect, and there was like so many different things, and then there was something like, I think it was like comfortability, and it was like, well, this one doesn't have a utility yet, but it's going to at some point, and I was like, bruh, like I'm in the NFT space and I'm struggling to understand like how this is going to stay at the level that it's at. And I was like, and also we had already seen in Web 2 a walk to earn like app back in like, I want to say it was like 2015 or 2016. And I was like, has anybody heard of that recently? Like, no. So I was like, I don't really see how this is going to continue to scale. I was like, sure, if you tell people, hey, you can walk and you can earn $200 for walking, like that sounds great. Most people I think are going to do that, right? But also, is that are we then creating a Ponzi where like people have to get more and more people in so that more and more people are buying these tokens, so the token price stays up, so that you still make money from the shoes and from walking and everything like that? And I was like, I just don't see how long term that makes sense. And then once we started to see, I want to say it was right around when Luna crashed, everything crashed alongside it. And like that's kind of how it goes in crypto. Like there's nothing that's like immune to like the overall like massive market change, right? And so when we started to see that, all of a sudden it became the price of GMT or whatever it was, GST, I can't remember these things. It drastically shot down, right? And all of a sudden there wasn't nearly the incentive for people to go and walk, right? And so then you get a bunch of people who maybe aren't like in the NFT space or really into crypto, but like maybe somebody just kind of red pilled them with Steppen, who I think all of a sudden were like, wait, so what happened? Why did I go from earning this to earning that? And I think it's like not only just if we're giving people a financial incentive, like a strict financial incentive of like that was walk to earn, right? Is that going to be, how is that going to work when like the market shifts, and how is that going to be maintained? And I feel like that in hindsight is like pretty obvious as like a huge flaw of like, how is that going to be maintained when the price of the token isn't worth what it was? And then at the same time, it needs to be simpler, because I was like, man, if you set up everything for somebody and you're like, all right, just go walk. Okay, that's not that difficult, but are they really learning anything about Web3? Are they really like getting involved? No, they're just being told like, hey, press this button on your app and go walk. Okay, I don't really know if that's like actually educating people and stuff like that. If they really want to get into it, well, all of a sudden now it's this like super complicated thing of like, I'm trying to figure out the gamification aspects of it, but it's still so overcomplicated, and nobody could perfectly understand it, because at the time you had GMT and GST, and I want to say one of them wasn't out yet. And it was like, well, when this token's out, it's going to do this, but I think it's going to do that. And no one seemed to have like great answers on it. And then it was like, and the comfortability, like that attribute is going to be like, that's going to affect, well, I don't really know. And so all of a sudden I was like, no one can pitch it well. And if no one can pitch it well, that means no one understands it well, right? So how do you, I guess, like avoid the mistakes of some of these other projects? And mind you, I hope Steppen succeeds. I hope they figure it out. I hope they figure out how to simplify it and things like that. But how do you avoid looking at some of the other projects that have come out, some of the Web3 games and stuff that have had success and then have fallen off? How do you learn from those experiences?
Yeah, so I think there's two key things that based on what you touched on. The first one is like frictionless onboarding, right? And so this is through discoverability. You've got to be available in the major app stores. You've got to be able to be downloaded and found on Google Play and iTunes and the iOS store. And so I think that's part of it. You've got to be able to what I call time to fun, right? So once you download the app, a Web2 game, you expect to accept some terms of service and almost immediately be playing, right? And so like, how do we get that in a Web3 game? And that's going to be incredibly important. The idea that and then the other part of frictionless onboarding would be free to play as long as you want, because that's what we expect in Web2 games as well. And so the idea that you have to go buy some shoes, or you have to buy a token, or you have to set up a blockchain wallet, or you have to do these things to get in, I think are all major barriers to anybody coming into Web3. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on, frictionless onboarding, by solving all three of those problems. The second one would be just the basic tokenomics. And I think that they had some, what I refer to as brokenomics, right? And so they had a 2-token system, which I think immediately sets up a lot of advantages for the founders and the governance token holders, and a lot of disadvantages for the people who are actually doing the work. And so I think that we've really tried to fix that as well. I firmly believe that you need to have a limited supply of a single token, which means it puts the emphasis, or it puts the pressure on the game builder to actually say, how do we drive value for that token? And how do we, once we're done emitting those tokens, what do we do next, right? And I think there's a lot of things that we can do next. I'll take, D-Guys is a really good example of this, where Dust was their initial staking benefit, right? And they built utility for Dust and some things that you could do, but we knew that Dust was going to run out. I think you mentioned it runs out today. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're already done.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it runs out today. Now people will know when we're filming this. And now they have this points meta, right? They're going to have like this reward store. Well, once you build an IP in a community that people want access to, you now start to be able to deliver value in ways that you don't have to create the value anymore. And so I think that that's where we're looking at, like, okay, we have enough time to basically 3 years, which is our full token emission schedule, before we are completely minted out of tokens and every single one will be in circulation, that we have to drive the value. And then at some point, if we continue to do that, we can bring in other value from outside sources. But what I would say is the tokenomics of it, but also you have to have utility for the token. Like, if the only utility is to put it back into something that you don't really know what you're putting it back into, or to hold it and sell it on exchange. If the only utility to sell it on exchange, at some point people catch on to that and realize that, like, why am I buying this thing that all other people who are earning it are trying to do is sell? And so we're obsessed with building what I call happiness sinks, which means as we start to, and I know that we had talked earlier and you're like, the token meta is kind of broken. We're 3 weeks away from an IDO right now. Like, we are minting a token, right? But that token is, when I go back to like, instead of trying to like figure out, let's mint a token and then back into some utility for it, we're building in, like, the blueprint has a ton of utility for the token inside the game, inside the gaming ecosystem, inside the larger Honeyland ecosystem. And then the goal would be to even expand it into IRL. I've always talked about, with my community from early on, this idea of like Honeyland Island, that like our Genesis holders and Honeyland token holders will be the ones who will be able to access Honeyland Island. And people are like, well, what is that? And I haven't really had any sort of a clear vision. I see what DGods is doing at DNYC or whatever they're doing, right? Where they're like taking over a whole hotel and building this experience for DGods holders. And DGods holders are paying cash to be able to do that. My vision would be that we pay Honey to be able to do this, and we're creating this Honeyland experience, and it doesn't have to be at a hotel. It's not doing what he did, but like, it gives you like the idea of what an IRL experience can be that can start to expand outside of just a game. So we have a gaming ecosystem where the token is kind of created, but then, or a game that the token's created, we're creating a gaming ecosystem with a number of other titles and games below it that will allow you some really cool things that we're doing, trying to like tournamentize, bring like kind of some DraftKings mechanics into allowing us to play in tournaments and PvP and things like that, where we're risking honey, but being able to earn, or earn your honey as I'm playing you and things like that. And so like, I think we're building a lot of these things, and this is not, I don't think what today is about is trying to explain the game in detail, but to two things that I can take away from StepN are frictionless onboarding, and then building a token that has sound tokenomics and actual utility underneath it. And if we can do those two things properly, I think we can solve the problems that StepN ran into.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I completely agree on the frictionless onboarding, because I think that's one of the biggest issues is right now I'm like, dude, I feel like I say this every episode, but like, if you just really ask the 95% of the population how to explain like basic tech that we've all like known and used, like changing your passcode on iPhone from 4 characters to 6 characters, or like turning on 2-factor authentication on your Gmail. Most people really struggle with that. And I'm like, okay, so if you struggle with that, how the hell are you going to explain to somebody Web3 and like how to get into all of this? I was like, that's a completely, like, those are two drastically different animals, and both very difficult to achieve, is getting people to care enough to want to learn about all of it, right? And so I think the frictionless onboarding is huge. And you're right on the tokenomics. I think there are a lot of people who have realized in the last year, like, hey, just putting out a token just to put out a token doesn't really make sense. You got to have utility there. I think one of the first mobile games that I played a ton of is one called Tap Baseball. Have you ever played that?
I have not.
No big deal. It's basically, it's a licensed MLB game, and you can essentially, you just like, tap, and the guy swings the bat, and you try to hit a homer, you try to hit a single, whatever, right? And I would love how there were home run derbies that you could play people for like their in-game currency, right? And so if you won the derby, you put up a certain amount of the token, and then you received a certain amount back, and you could use that token to go and buy better players and like upgrade your team and things like that, right? I could see how that game could come into Web3 and really take it to the next level, while still giving people the ability of like, hey, if you don't want to get in and you just want to go the current like Web2 route of like just putting in $10 and buying gold that you can use in the game to go do this and do that, like, okay, hey, still do that. If you want to get even further into it, let's say from like one season to the next, if you want to like buy the NFT of this player and take it into your next team, like you could do that. And I think there are some ways that can work. I just don't think we've seen it yet. And I do think it's going to take obviously, hey, I want Honeyland to be the one that leads the front, right? But I wouldn't be shocked if it takes like a big company like Epic Games or EA Sports or one of those to do something in Web3 and to show it actually working with a game that like everybody's already used to, like NBA 2K or Madden or Fortnite or something along those lines. And I really do think like the more I'm in the Web3 space, I look at games like Fortnite and I'm like, I can easily see how you could turn this into a Web3 component of it, buying and selling skins on a marketplace for a crypto, like so many different things that you could do with that, right? Yeah, I mean, it's all really interesting. I think, once again, the space has changed so much. I'm sure this time next year we'll be doing another episode. Who knows? Maybe that'll be episode like number 5. But like, I know at that point we'll be talking about the gaming market and it will drastically change in the next year, right? So
yeah, well, that's one of the cool things about doing these podcasts. Like, I'd love to come back every other month and do this so that we have kind of a documented history of like, what's the vision today and what does that look like and how do we execute that and how does the gaming industry change? I would go back to when you talk about like, Epic Games or something like building Web3. The big question is like I talked about, Web2 gaming is not broken. Those companies make billions of dollars a year by being Web2. Right. And so like, I think that a lot of, and like I said, we may have even started this way. I think a ton of Web3 projects do start this way. They go, let's build a Web3 project, and they figure out like how that actually adds value to what could be built outside of Web3 or outside, like, yeah, in Web2. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so even for us, like, I think there's some challenges. I think that the cool thing and where we may see this be built by somebody like us, as opposed to like a known studio, is that one of the great things about Web3 is that you can invest in the project early and share in that upside as the project grows, right? Through the NFTs or through the tokens. And so I always explain this like a band, right? Like if I have a band that like I love and they're a local, let's call it LA band, right? And I get to go see them at coffee shops. Maybe it's my friend's band. Maybe I went to high school with them. And I'm telling people about them. I'm liking all their stuff on Facebook or Twitter, and all of a sudden they start getting a little bit bigger, and then they get a little bit bigger. And then all of a sudden next year they're at Coachella, right? Well, I went from like these really cool experiences where like I'm backstage with them. I have to drive 5 minutes to go see them at a coffee shop. I like get to high five them, to all of a sudden, like I'm nowhere near the stage. I have to drive hours to go see them. I have to pay hundreds of dollars for tickets. And like, I get penalized by their success. And I think Web3 flips this on its head to where it's like, you can almost invest in that band. And as you help them grow and help them become more successful, and they have something that you think a lot of other people will love, and we start to build that together, we're all sharing in the upside, that the band gets bigger, but so does every single one of the fans gets a better experience, not a worse experience. And I think that's a really cool thing about Web3.
I've never heard that perspective before. I really like that. I'm gonna clip that. We're posting that on Twitter. Love that. But yeah. So I want to go through the timeline of everything. So you guys basically come up with this idea right around, you said like November 2021, yep. And then I want to make sure, I'll just give the timeline. You tell me if I'm right. June 2022, you guys do the Genesis Eggs collection, right? And that was a collection of 5,550, right?
Just 5,500, yeah.
5,500. I can't speak. 5,500, and then you guys had the land collection in September 2022.
Yep.
And that was a 2,000 supply, right?
Correct.
And then in October, you guys had the reveal, right?
Correct.
And then in December 2022, you guys had the Generations collection.
Correct.
Okay, and that was 6,000. Am I right on that?
That was 6,000, yeah.
Come on, God, I got my numbers down. Okay, so. Were all of those collections planned from day one? And I guess like give a brief summary of like what the original collections are for, and then also because I can understand like the Genesis Eggs and then the land and then the reveal. Explain kind of the generations on top of that.
Yeah. So we mentioned earlier, but I am coming up on, I'm 2 days shy of my 1 year anniversary from the very first video that I ever posted to the community. And it was the reveal of our white paper, our initial white paper. And so I actually listened to that on the drive up here because I wanted to be like, just out of curiosity, like how far has the project come? I mentioned those exact 3 mints that were all planned. I mentioned them in a different order maybe, but we definitely mentioned those 3 mints to be planned. So they were all planned. So the first one was the Genesis collection. The idea of this was that like, this would be a collection that could be up to 11,000, but we were going to mint the first half on June 2nd. And we did like a June 1st, like pre-sale for like some like investors of the project and like, core team and some things like that like, but it was a fair mint. We got to mint like 5 each and things like that. And so that kind of seeded it. And then we had like a whitelist and then a public sale the next day. And as our like perfect welcome to the Solana ecosystem, we were supposed to, that was going to open up, the pre-sale was going to open up at 10 a.m. on June 1st. At 9:58 a.m., the Solana network shut down for 6 hours. Shut down. No TPS, zero TPS for 6 hours. They've done it 3 times, I think, in the history of in the blockchain. So that was our welcome to Solana. It was exactly what we needed. We picked it up. We reminted at 4 o'clock. We kind of pushed it back for 6 hours. 4 o'clock is when we started that. Fractal, who was our minting partner, they put the website back up at 4:00 and forgot to put the mint button on. And so at 4:10 was our very first mint on June 1st. We had that pre-sale on June 1st. We then June 2nd went into our like whitelist. We didn't even sell out our whitelist. We went into public, and we ended up selling out our public in 102 minutes. And so it was really cool to we were scared when we didn't mint out in the whitelist. Like we weren't sure if the public was going to show up. And so it was really cool that we did that. It was just this anxiety filled, like just awesome and like incredible moment, and it was just June 2nd, you remember, was not ideal time to mint.
Oh, not at all. No.
It was, especially for like a brand new collection, a brand new community. Our launch, Fractal was like, hey guys, you should probably push this back. Nobody's minting out right now. Our advisors, were kind of like, I would definitely push it back. And I remember getting on the phone like in mid-May with Fractal, and I had my team on the phone, and I said, listen guys, I've given this a lot of thought. And I know that you're encouraging us to push back the date, to drop the price, to drop the collection size. But here's what's going to happen. We are going to mint out a 5,500 piece collection at 2.5 SOL on June 2nd. Now let's work backwards from there and figure out how we write that damn story. And everybody was kind of like, all right, let's go. Like there was no more wavering of like what we were like, we said it and we were like, let's go do it. And I think that we had built the community the right way, and it was really, really cool. And so Genesis collection was really, really fun. And then the second collection was the land collection. And now we had a little bit more credibility. The purpose of the land collection, and it was always talked to be this way, was that it was going to reward our existing and early holders. So we created basically we built like a incubating to where because it was going to be months before you'd actually reveal the art for your eggs. So we built like an incubating system so you could like stake your eggs. We did like this point system so that you would, every one egg for one day earned you 1 point in terms of incubating. We did a bunch of raffles, but then throughout those raffles, we gave away like 500 or raffled off like 500 land whitelists. So a lot of our top holders got a bunch of, land whitelist. I think we may have, I don't know exactly how we gave out a couple other whitelists to some of our holders as well. And then we did that we called it guest list, but it was the Ute list for the very first time. We were the very first project outside of Utes to use that Dust Labs software. So it was really cool to get to work with that team. It was cool for them to give us the bit of confidence to say like, we want you guys to be the first project, because they had hundreds of projects that had submitted applications, and we were the very first one, which was cool. And so we took in just shy of, I think, 7,000 applications. We didn't even get through them all. It was an intensive amount of work. I know that they got like 50 or 60,000. I don't know how they could have possibly gone through that, like wild amounts of work. And so up till 2 a.m. the morning of when we're minting, we're still like trying to approve applications and this whole thing. And I think we approved 2,300. So we had like 800 whitelists that we had given out that were like guaranteed mints. We had like 2,300 that we had approved through the whitelist or through what we called our guest list. And then we minted that day, and we minted that collection out in 18 minutes. We actually crashed the Fractal website, which is kind of cool. And so it took about 18 minutes to mint that collection. So that was like mint number 2 under our belt. It was September. Still wasn't like a great minting market, but it was at least recovering a little bit. And that was a lot of fun. And then the December mint was always planned, and it was always intended to be a lower entry price into the game. So like the Genesis, these were going for, I think Genesis eggs go for about 10 SOL right now, which is not like through the roof, but like it's not an accessible entry point to somebody who just wants to come in and play the game. By the way, you don't need NFTs to play our game, but if you want NFTs, you can buy them. And so, and then the land's going for like 15 SOL or somewhere around there. Again, not very accessible. And so we wanted something that was like really accessible. And so we built this Generations collection, and this was going to be they're less valuable than the Genesis Bees. They're all playable in the game, but they're less valuable, and they're an inflationary supply. So people can breed, people can hatch. We'll have more mints of these things. So unlike the Genesis collection, which is fixed, that it'll never be more than 11,000, this one hasn't, a much more inflationary supply. And so I think we minted for 1.5 SOL was the mint price for those. We made this like because we wanted to expand our like reach, our visibility for the project. We had a lot of really dedicated holders, but the number was small. In terms, a lot of our holders hold a lot of our items, and so we wanted to get more eyeballs and holders for the collection. And so we moved from Fractal to Magic Eden with this one, just to get kind of a new set of eyeballs. And they're both incredible minting partners. Have loved working with both of them. And we just basically said, if you're a human, you can get whitelist or guest list. And so we had set up a website, and it was link a wallet, link a Twitter, and link a Discord. And if you could do those 3 things, you're on our guest list. And so I think we had about 6,000 people do that. And it was a 6,000 piece collection. Each person could mint up to 3. And so we minted that out in about 8 minutes, which was again, kind of a good, like a cool moment. You never know. You're full of anxiety and anytime you have a mint. And so each one of those served a different purpose for not only the holders, like in terms of what the assets they were getting, but served a different purpose for our community as well. in terms of, like getting our original holders in and then rewarding our holders and then bringing more eyeballs and holders into the project. And so those have been our 3 mints. And finally, we'll get to actually start to play with those and start to put them into the ecosystem beyond just, kind of the community side of things when the game goes live in March. So
there we go. There we go. That's exciting. No, I mean, that's one, it's impressive that you guys were able to mint out 3 different collections. Like that's not an easy accomplishment, especially at the various times that you guys minted, because 2022 was not the greatest year for minting. So shout outs to you guys for that. With that said, so when you guys when you guys were originally coming up with the project and the Genesis eggs and things like that, how long did you think at that time it was going to be until the game actually released? Did you go into it thinking, hey, it's going to be a year? Or did you think it was going to be, what did you think at that time?
Yeah. So remember, I told my wife I'd be working really hard for like 3 to 6 months. I think we initially thought that we would put out the alpha of our game sometime around like April of 2022. And then I think we kind of pushed that back and reset expectations to like July, which then got kind of reset to like August, all internally. We didn't announce all these dates publicly. We kept trying to like give ourselves a little bit more runway. And then we finally announced that we would launch the alpha in November, and we did. We launched on November 2nd. Like literally I'm on a plane to Portugal for Breakpoint, and the alpha is going live, which is like a really, really cool moment for us. It's a kind of a cool, just like timestamp of when that alpha went live. And so the alpha's been live for about 4 months. The goal was though that we would
launch. And the alpha is like a test game or something?
Yeah. So we've had like, just under 5,000 wallets that have connected, people from our community. It's all organic, people that have found Honeyland and wanted to come in, and you can download, you can start playing it on your iPhone or your iOS, your iPhone or Android. And the idea is that like we've set up like an alpha feedback channel in our Discord and some like feedback forums. And so we want to get like any bugs or errors, obviously, UI or UX improvements, ways that we can make the game more fun or easier to understand, feature request, all of these types of things. So we've made like every week we push a whole new update to the alpha, and it's getting better and better. And I would say, not that I was embarrassed, but because I was like, most people are like, damn, this is one of the most polished alphas I've seen. But like if I was giving this to like a friend or an investor or somebody like you, I would have always came with a disclaimer like, listen, this is an alpha, right? It's finally to the point where I don't feel like I have to give that disclaimer, like not everything's going to work perfectly, but like it is really good right now. We've got 6 weeks heading into the game launch, and there's some little things that we're tidying up. We're moving some things that are on chain to off chain just for a better in-game experience. Like there's little things like that that'll have a massive like improvement. But when this game goes live, and I think it's initially we launched the alpha in November. We wanted to launch the game in December. We thought we'd have like a 1 month alpha. And once we started to collect the feedback, we were like, that would not be responsible. Like, let's take the time that we need to take. And, we built a lot of trust with our community, and it's one of the benefits of having a small community, like that is deeply invested and believes in who we are, is that when we go, listen guys, we're going to push this back like 3 more months. They're like, cool. That's the right move. Let's go. Right. And so they keep playing the alpha, and all their points and everything's going to reset when it goes live in March. They know that. They're still clocking, like we have right now, we have about 300 daily active users. We have about 800 weekly active users. We have just over 1,000 monthly active users, I think. And the daily active users are spending like 30 minutes a day in the game. The weekly active are spending like hour, 30 minutes in the game, like per week. So it's like the metrics are like really, really good for like, especially considering that's an alpha, which tells us that it's a fun game to play, and that's, I think that's the other thing that we didn't really talk about, the frictionless onboarding, the really sound tokenomics with like real utility. The other thing is it just has to be fun to play. Like it has to feel like a Web 2 game, like, and be insanely fun to play. If it's not fun, that's where you ran into the Axie stuff where it became a job, and so I think that's kind of the other thing. And we're starting to prove that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's got to be fun. And like, I think that is like it's one of those things that I feel like doesn't get mentioned enough in this space. Is like, dude, the game has to be something that you actually are looking forward to playing. Because when you really think about it, it's like, the games that I feel like the majority of us like know of are really, really simple that like people play on a regular basis. Like you can go onto Twitter at any one point in time and you'll see somebody post their like Wordle score, right? Like my mom and I send our Wordle scores back and forth to each other every day. And it's like, well, because it's a decently fun game. It's quick and easy. And like, it's something to keep us engaged with, like showing each other our high scores and things like that. Simplicity is always going to win out at the end of the day. Right. And if it's simple and fun, you got the winning success. Right. So with that, when you guys guys are like, you guys have all these various different mints and things like that. It's obviously hard to maintain doing that, right? Like if you went into 2023 and you're like, all right, and we've got 3 more mints, right? Like at some point your community is going to go like, hey, what the fuck, right? So how do you guys plan on like continually monetizing the game? Like, is there a way to monetize it from a Web 2 perspective? And then also like, what is your way of like marketing it in Web 2? So kind of two questions all at once.
Yeah. So it's the beauty of, man, I look at almost every other like NFT or like, because we are an NFT project. I think it's one of the fun things that we've done. It's why we've been able to like sustain a floor price for 7 months without a game, is because like we treat it like an NFT project. We've done a lot of really cool things for the community as well. But what I'm really excited about is that running an NFT project means you have to always have the next event and the next event and the next event. Honeyland is a product. It's a business. Like that's the thing that, like coming from our Web 2 days, like we're built, like we know how to build businesses. We're founders. This isn't a project, it's a business. And so I think that's one of the really cool things, is that like the game has an economy in it that has a bunch of, what I call happiness sinks, what a traditional game developer or designer would call token sinks. So like there's a number of things that you can do in the game that cost money to do that. So as you're earning the Honeyland token in the game, the goal is that we provide enough ways that you want to spend that back. So whether it's through breeding or whether it's through upgrading or whether it's through buying cool like cosmetic traits or whether it's through decorating your hive, whether it's through, attacking a player, different things like that, whether it's through staking or unstaking, like all these are ways that like they're small, some are small, some are larger, token or happiness sinks. And then below that play and own game, we're building, I've kind of touched on this, but like the Honeyverse, which is essentially an arcade of games that are like Web 2 games that bring in some Web 3 mechanics that are ways that you can go spend honey. So I talked about, kind of building this like DraftKings style stuff. So it's funny you mentioned Wordle. We're building a Wordle game right now that will be like a PvP as well as a completely tournamentized version of Wordle. So like, think of if we just taking like the DraftKings idea, like think if we said like, cool, we're going to have a Wordle tournament that starts in 10 minutes and we can fill up to 100 people. You'll all put 1 honey in and each of you will have 10 minutes to complete as many words as you can. Now, if you miss a word, you get negative points. If you get it in your first try, you get a lot more points. And so your goal is to try and get the highest score that you can over that 10-minute period. And you're placed on a leaderboard in there. And then we'll pay out the top 20% with the, first, second, third, getting the majority of those honey tokens. But, up to the top 20% getting paid out, the bottom 80% all lose their 1 honey. And we take a small percentage of that, very similar to DraftKings. So we would pay out basically 90 total honey tokens, but we would have collected 100. And there's this kind of jackpot mentality that like you can literally enter 1 honey, play a game of Wordle and potentially win like 50 honey. It's really cool. And so I think it adds like a whole nother element when we have this token economy and we have this peer-to-peer economy. But the goal is that underneath Honeyland sits like this whole like arcade of really, really fun Web 2 style games that are like easy to understand, active gameplay, casual gamers, pick up your phone. You just need to waste some time and you can play it in a completely free to play Web 2 version, or you can take some of those honey tokens that you have and you can start to use them. So that the every game in the ecosystem will share a single account that you transfer assets in between seamlessly. It's pretty cool.
So if somebody is downloading the app, let's say on Web 2, right? Like they don't know anything about NFTs. They just see this game Honeyland. Let's say it's in the top gaming apps or whatever, right? And they download it. Is there a way for them to, like, once again, just like, I believe you've said this, they can just start playing, right? There will be a way for them to just start playing without owning the NFT and things like that. Will there also be, I know one of the more like common ways that like these businesses tend to monetize is they'll just put advertisements up. And then if you pay to like unlock the, pro version or whatever, then you don't have advertisements and things like that. Is that something that you guys plan on doing as another like revenue stream essentially?
Yeah, so not ads, but like there's a lot of other in-game unlocks. So to be clear, the onboarding experience will look like this: discoverable in every major app store. That's the iOS store, Google Play Store, Samsung Galaxy Store, as well as the Saga Store. You'll be able to find the app. You'll immediately be able to download. You'll be able to sign in and create an account with either your Google or your Apple ID. You can also, if you have a Phantom wallet, you can connect that at that point. But for a non-Web3 user, they'll just sign in with Google. We automatically create a non-custodial wallet for them. They can export the private keys at any given time. So their game now is linked to a Web3 wallet, but they'll never know that. Like 50% of our players will never know that we're a Web3 game. And so they'll start earning honey tokens, Honeyland tokens in the game that have a represented Honeyland token on the blockchain that we're holding in like a treasury wallet, that if they wanted to ever export those from the ecosystem, they could do it. And we would take it from our treasury wallet and we would put it in their wallet. Now, I should be clear that in order to actually take tokens out of the ecosystem, you will have to upgrade to like a Beamium. So most players who want to just completely play free to play, they can do that forever. but they just can't take the tokens out of the ecosystem, right? They have to spend them back into the ecosystem. So you talked about like a business, those Honeyland tokens are traded on exchanges, meaning they have an actual value. So if players don't want to pay the BMM, they don't want to take them out of the ecosystem, the only other thing they can do is spend them in the ecosystem. And so those are coming back to us as a treasury, and then we'll have ways through centralized exchanges, OTC, there's a number of things that we'll do very soundly and mechanically to move those back into the market to convert the Honeyland tokens that we're taking this treasury into USDC, which will then fund our project. And so we're building a real business. The second part of what you asked was, how do we go reach Web2 users? And maybe you heard it early on, but I talked about how Justin is like literally sold the UA business, has built tons of technology. One of my other co-founders, Apoorv, same thing. He's built like really focused on performance marketing, a lot of like supply chain type of stuff, but really when it comes to like user acquisition, mobile ad tech, like that is a specialty of our team. And so we like this was kind of the reason that we got into this space, is that we're like, we have an unfair advantage in user acquisition. So if we can launch a Web3 game that kicks ass, like the ability to go onboard users is when we can really start to shine. And so for anybody who's like looking at the game and the ecosystem and the project now and is pumped on it, just wait till we get to the go button, till we get to the end of March and we actually get to start onboarding. And so we've got a deal right now with Samsung that they've guaranteed us 500,000 downloads over the next 6 months. We're going to be one of the feature partners in the Galaxy Store. I don't know how much I can share, but Solana Mobile, we're very close to their team, and there could be some really, really cool alpha that they want to be the ones to announce, but some really, really cool alpha with Honeyland and Solana Mobile. Solana, I think, sees us as their runaway game this year, and they're doing a lot to promote that. Solana Foundation, Solana Labs, Solana Ventures and Investor, Solana Foundation, asking us to be one of their premier featured games at what's going to be called Play GG, which is like their Solana Games Day that they're going to be doing in San Diego this year. They've already talked to us about that. Like I said, Solana Labs and Solana Mobile really having a heavy focus on us. So that's really cool. We've got a number of an experience in just like traditional, like get into the app stores and some of the like performance marketplaces and really start to spend. We'll take the first like 3 months to really learn how to optimize everything that we need to do there. And then we'll be able to spend and acquire users more efficiently than anybody in this space, because that's like what we literally know better than anybody. We've got a couple like really cool like performance deals for either like incentivized, like what's called like incent advertising, where like you only pay when certain things happen for users, but we've got like networks that are going out and doing that. And we've got a couple very strategic partnerships in like geographic locations around the globe, some in like Southeast Asia, some in LATAM. And so like we've got some really, really cool partnerships there as well. So like this is where like I think a lot of Web3 projects kind of, like if OK Bears and Great Coats and all these were like great at building hype and like that was their superpower, like our superpower is user acquisition. And I think that like a lot of Web3 projects think about, particularly games, think about like, let's launch a token. Let's figure out how we can build a game around it that doesn't necessarily even add value, but then what do we do and how do we get users? It's why the number one game on Solana right now has 8,000 daily active users. Walk-in. It's basically a step-in like competitor. So the top two games on Solana right now are Walk-in and Step-in. That's wild. Like those are games, don't get me wrong, but they're not games in the way that we're thinking of like mobile games. And so I think this space is ripe. Our goal is that we'll have 150,000 daily active users, meaning that we would be like, 20x the second largest game in the Solana ecosystem by the end of this year. Our goal is to be larger in token market cap than Step-in is right now, which is a 250 or $265 million market cap. Our goal is to be the largest NFT market cap project, taking over that rank from Aurora. So like we've got a lot of big goals, but I think that we've got, it's about building a really, really cool product, but then also figuring out kind of that second part, which is like, how do you onboard users? And so our goal is onboard 2 million users this year, have what we would call a 13% stick rate. And that gets us to our 150,000 daily active users. So that's kind of the plan and how we intend to break it down.
There we go. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I know what we'll have to do is we'll have to run back the next podcast episode, maybe like a week or two after you guys put out the game, and that way I can play and I can give my full honest review on here, and we can just have that'll be cool to be able to, we can put up a little video of the gameplay and everything like that. So we'll definitely have to do that. But
yeah, I love it. And one of the thing with like sharing all of those like literally detailed plans and goals that we've just established as a team is that like there's real accountability now, right? Like if I tell you I'm going to go lose 15 pounds and I publicly tell you that, you get to check in with me, right? And so like I don't think that obviously there's a lot of work that has to go into doing everything that we've talked about, but those are the goals. And I'm not afraid to share those publicly. And I will tell you that those are not even the biggest goals that we have. Those are the goals that don't make me sound absolutely crazy, but internally we've got a lot bigger goals of what we want to accomplish, not only in 2023, but certainly beyond.
Well, there we go. So, okay. So my next question for you is, so obviously you've been in this ecosystem for a minute now. You've been a founder for almost a year now. So what has been like the biggest hurdle that you've faced that maybe you didn't expect to face, or one that you expected to face and it's been a tough hurdle?
Man, I think the one that's maybe the most challenging, but it's been the most fun, is just like not falling into the traps of like what Web3 metas are. Web3 is so new that like somebody tries something, it works for somebody, and then that becomes the meta. And there's not really a lot of like logic to why that would work or how that's sustainable. And I look at things like, Axie, you talk about some of these like just kind of brokenomics issues. And a lot of the metas of Web3 projects where like you talk about like launching a token now is just kind of a broken meta, but everybody did it, right? And so I think the biggest challenge in this space is, and I think it's one of the things that we've been really strong at, is like when we make decisions, we want to make decisions intentionally, not by accident. Meaning that like if we're going to launch a token, or we're going to do a raffle, or we're going to have a whitelist, or we're going to, whatever it is, right? That we kind of look at the existing metas and we're like, okay, let's break that down let's strip it all the way down to the ground, and let's rebuild that back up from the ground up. And if we end up like where the current meta is, at least we're intentionally we know why we're doing that. But oftentimes, almost always, I should say, we iterate in some capacity, and oftentimes we completely innovate. We do something totally different. And sometimes when you do things different, there's a big risk, and people think you're crazy, or things don't work or do work. And a good example is we did after our first mint, which was the Genesis collection. In fact, I'll give you two. So when we went into our Genesis collection, we were a new project, and the meta of the time was like just get whitelist, collabs, do all of that stuff. And we were like, you know what? We don't want this grind mentality. Like, we really want to reward people who are contributing to our project, not just people who are like in ways that matter to us, not just like tweet and retweet to a bunch of we'll style people that don't matter, like just kind of these botted type of things. And so so that you can immediately get it and flip. And so we did, like, when you were coming, if you wanted whitelist, we would do collabs. But we said anybody from your community who wants whitelist has to answer a quiz about our project, where they had to read our white paper, watch a video. They had to like actually become knowledgeable. And we felt that if they were knowledgeable about our project and still wanted to mint, there was a better chance that they would end up being a holder. And I think that was a really cool thing. We had 13,000 people in our Discord when we minted that 5,500 piece collection on like at one of the most bear markets ever. The meta of the time was that you had to have at least 5 times the number of people in your Discord as the collection you were trying to mint, which means we were about 1/3 of the size that we needed to be. And yet we still minted out. And I think that we kind of bucked the meta of like hand out whitelist, hype, and we just kind of said like, let's find some people that really matter. And then the other thing that we did that I think really helped was we were like, okay, if we're not going to go build the hype, how do we allow people to have confidence? Because when you see 200,000 followers in Discord, or 200,000 members in Discord, like that gives you confidence. That creates something that like people want to mint. And so we created this paper ham bitch insurance. We're like, why don't we just flip this meta of like that the risk should be on the minter, and why don't we put the mint back on us? We told everybody who minted our Genesis collection that if you'd rather have your 2.5 SOL back than the NFT that you minted for 41 days after the mint, all you got to do is floor it and list it at 2.5 SOL on Magic Eden. If it sits there for 12 hours or more, we as a project will buy it and burn it, meaning the collection gets stronger anyways. And so I think that was kind of like the thing that a lot of people were like, well, it's risk-free. Like, unless these guys are totally full of shit, like I have 41 days to actually decide if this was a good investment or not. It's a risk-free investment. And so I think that's where, when we went to public, people were like, well, fuck it. Why don't I just pick these things up and I can floor them if it doesn't work? And so I think that, again, was just like kind of going against the traditional metas and like thinking a little bit differently and saying like, how can we build this in a better way? And, oftentimes we do end up like where the metas are, but I think sometimes that's the biggest challenge in this space is like understanding that stuff is really new. It's not 20 years old like Web 2, where like things have been tried and tested and we're at a place that's really, really mature and proven. We're at a place that's fun to experiment. Like, let's go,
Yeah, I mean, and those experiments are what's going to lead to us actually having Web3 become mainstream, right? Like at the end of the day, we have to continue to innovate. We can't be afraid to try new things. If we're just doing the same shit over and over and over again, this space is going to get stale and it's going to get boring and things like that. But we have a lot of people in the space, including you guys, who are continually trying to push the envelope of what is possible and what people are actually interested in, and to think about not just like what people want, but what they will want, and think ahead of time and try to innovate with that mindset of like, let's keep people entertained, let's keep them having fun, let's keep it simple, let's keep it, all of that. And I think that's one of the great things about the space that we're in, is like we have the ability to influence where it goes. And so that's a pretty cool perspective. There's not a lot of industries where you actually have the ability to drastically impact the future of it. If Honeyland is a super successful game, you guys will drastically impact all of the Web3 games that come out in the next year or two, right?
Without question.
And that's a huge thing to be able to say. And so with that, like it's a cool challenge because, like you said, you're confident in your abilities. You're confident in your abilities to onboard people onto the game and things like that. And so if you are successful with that, you then become the leading thought leader in this entire Web3 gaming part of things, and that would be really, really cool to see, and is also going to then bring value to your holders. So it's a very cool perspective. So in a perfect world, where do you want to see Honeyland a year from now?
Yeah, so I mean, man, in a perfect world, so end of 2023, we intend to be the #1 gaming project on Solana. I mentioned that, 150,000 daily active users. So if we fast forward to like a year from now, I think the natural kind of next progression beyond that is to start to explore other chains. Like our goal is to always be known for us being a Solana game, but I think that there's opportunity beyond that once you become the #1 project. So I think to start moving kind of multi-chain, I think I'd love to see us as a project that gets talked about in conversations and other podcasts. It's almost impossible for you to have a podcast sitting here without talking about DeGods, and something that they've done. They're so influential in that space. I would love for Honeyland to be that type of project that people reference and refer to, that like things they've done, the things that we've done right, or things that we've kind of changed, or things that we've created and or made popular, or any of those things. And so I think that's kind of that's what I'd love to see on like a macro level. But yeah, I mean, I want to be the #1 gaming project on Solana. That's the most immediate thing that we need to accomplish first, that unlocks everything else that we want to build.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same mindset that I approach with my podcast. I'm like, I want to be the podcast that when people talk about, hey, there's this really cool podcast I know, it's the Marc Colcer podcast, right? And so I know that there are things that I need to do to continue elevate the content I'm creating, to elevate the conversation, ask better questions and things like that, have, really interesting guests on, and make sure I'm keeping the conversation fun and keeping it moving and keeping it, where people are, even if they're not part of Honeyland yet, they still want to watch this and get to know you and get to know what you guys are building. So, I think at the end of the day, like if you believe in yourself and you believe in your ability to adjust as time goes on, you see the results of the game. If you're looking at the success of the game in the first 2 months, and let's say it's not going the way you expected it to, it's having that ability to pivot and say, okay, what are people not liking about it? What are we not doing to retain these people? Why are they not spending, if they're spending 30 minutes on the game, why are they not spending 45, right? And it's that kind of mindset. I look at the numbers all the time of how many hours or minutes are people spending watching this podcast episode, right? Why did this one have 30 minutes of viewing time and this one had 47 minutes and this one only had 12 minutes, right? Why did this one have, 5,000 watch time hours and this one only have 200, right? And so those are the things where it's constantly looking at like, what is it? Is it something I'm doing? Is it something that am I not asking the right questions? Am I not having, am I not keeping the conversation moving and things like that? And so there's so many different things, and all of this is about learning. But the cool part is we learn, we adapt, we innovate, and we continue leading the space. And that's kind of the fun part. There's not many spaces where you can truly say, I can learn from my experiences, learn from others, and adjust and make moves. And that's literally going to impact the entire market. So with that, I want to give you a chance to drop some alpha for your holders, for your future holders and things like that. Is there anything that you want to tell people? It can be alpha, or it can just be something that you want to tell your holders or future holders about the future of Honeyland.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really excited about the next 6 weeks. 3 really cool things that we're doing. Number 1, we're launching what we call the Hive Mind, which is literally being like alpha tested by 10 of our community members today. It's one of the cool things. I think that we're not only building for our community, we're building like literally with our community. We really try and take their feedback and listen. So the Hive Mind was, we knew knew that like in order that we're going to need a staking platform for our game. And I challenged the team. I said, let's build the best staking platform that's ever existed. And so I use at this point air quotes when I say staking platform, because it's become so much more. This is really like a desktop companion to your mobile game, to where you can like strategize, analyze, manage all of your assets. You can of course stake all of your assets. You can track everything that everything's doing. You can see all of the lifetime stats, the in-game, like exactly like what your bees are doing in the game right now through like a desktop companion. So this thing's going to be really, really cool. I don't know that there's like, it's not a feature, it's a product. And so I'm really excited about that. It's being alpha tested right now, should be live next week for our community to start staking. That staking will actually start accumulating points heading into the launch of the game. We're going to have an IDO next month. So we've got 5 launch pads that we're working with. Each one, a very strategic partner, brings a different set of value. I know that 5 launch pads seems like a lot. I really wanted to push back and do as few as we could, but each one brought a very strategic, significant, and unique value to the project. And so we're going to be launching on 5 launch pads, and then we'll IDO on March 16th, which should be a lot of fun. And then the game will go live. We're expecting sometime between March 25th and March 30th, like the end of the month. And so I think just a really, really exciting like time for us with 16 months of just grind and work. And when I say grind, like it's a lot of fun. It's challenged me in new ways that I've ever been challenged before, which is just like, it's cool. It's fun. Like I don't have to fight myself to get up, in the mornings to head into the office and to go like work. I really feel like this is a ton of fun, and it really challenges me in cool ways. What I've set out like in our vision for this year, I had like a vision keynote for our community that I laid out in January, is that like I broke this year up into 4 quarters. So Q1 is just launch. Like let's get the token, let's launch the token, let's launch the game, let's launch the Hive Mind, which is our staking platform. Let's launch those 3 things. Q2 is going to be optimized. And so, you talked about like if 2 weeks or 2 months after the game, things aren't going well, we're still in that optimized phase, And so like the goal is that we'll have probably 20,000 daily active users by the end of Q2. I think that's a good enough like metric that we've proven that we can onboard users, but it's a way that we can still, optimize around that. And then Q3 is going to be the grow phase, where we really try and like stress test a lot more of what we're doing and building. And then Q4 becomes the scale phase. And that's where we really get to that. I think the last maybe 1 million downloads will be in Q4 of this year. And so, I think that anybody who's, looking for kind of some alpha or where the project goes, our goal isn't to pump your bags overnight. Our goal isn't to, when we IDO, to get our token from, the IDO launch price, which will be 3.5 cents per token. The goal isn't to get that to 35 cents overnight. The goal is to have a really slow, steady, sustainable, predictable build over time. And that's what we're looking to do. And so, and to build a really, really fun game with along the way. So I think that's what has me most excited right now.
Well, I'm excited for it too. I mean, you're one of the people that I can tell how much you care about your project, and I'm always going to root for those people to succeed, because I can genuinely tell when I'm watching your video content that you put out and just like talking with you on the phone and things like that, like how passionate you are about Honeyland. And then sitting here having this conversation with you today, I can tell how much you love it, how much you enjoy the process of building it. And so it's been really exciting to see, the mints playing out. Like I've, from the sidelines, I've seen everything with that. And then being able to get to know you and get to know, everything that you guys are building. It's gonna be really cool. I'm looking forward to playing the game, having you back on whatever in early April or whatever, and to give my feedback as a user, and then to see where you guys take it over the course of the next year. So
that'll be fun.
So with that, drop your socials. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I would say Twitter, we're Honeyland GameFi is our main Twitter handle. I'm Filbert Steiner on Twitter, and then you can find us on YouTube. Go search for I think it's Honeyland WAGME, but just search Honeyland, you'll find the project. And then we've got a Discord. We're pretty active in Discord, but all the ways that you'd expect. I would say if you want to go play the alpha, everybody can still do that right now. It's guide.honey.land. You'll be able to download the alpha directly from there. We've got an app in the App Store right now. It's our NFT Explorer app, which is really cool. Just go search in either Google Play Store or the iOS Store. Search Honeyland NFT Explorer app. If you're looking to get into any of our collections, that'll give you all like the rarity rankings and cosmetic rankings and all that stuff. Like because of the way that we built the project, Moonrank and How Rare, they don't know how to like rank our because they have utility ranking and cosmetic ranking and the different collections. And so like we went and built our own ranking system, which is really cool. That app will help you get there. It's a really fun app to play with. And then I was going to say one other thing, but I forget. So
Where can people find those videos that you've been putting out?
Those are most of those are going to be on YouTube. We post them into Discord as well. I'm doing right now something that we call 41 drops of honey, where for 41 straight days, I'm launching just one more drop of evidence of why you can be bullish on how we're building the future of Web3 gaming and our project. So it's a lot of video. It's like 2 minutes or less videos. So there's a big Twitter thread that we're adding a new one every single day. You can also find those as a playlist on YouTube. But if you like my voice or my face, this is a great project because you're going to see and hear a lot of it. If you don't, I apologize, but we're on Spotify too, but even those are video. So yeah, you can't get away from my stupid face. So if you don't like my stupid face, just like close your eyes or something. But I try and be as active as I can in the community and really give a ton of updates. And like I said, we're not just building for the community, but we're building with the community. And I think that keeping the community updated is a big part of that. So.
Facts.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on today. Appreciate you driving up here and looking forward to running it back round 2. Looking forward to the future, the success of Honeyland. And we'll chat with everybody soon. It's been a great time.
100%. Appreciate you, Mark.
No problem. See you guys.